When did you realize your best friend was fake? I was showering when suddenly clumps of my hair started falling into the shower drain. I instantly told my best friend Amelia to come over that afternoon, and when I showed her, she tilted her head and said, "Okay, that's definitely weird, but it's probably just stress. You've been studying for finals like crazy." She had a point. I'd been pulling all-nighters for 2 weeks straight. I convinced myself Amelia was right. It was just stress. It would grow back. By the next week, I was finding hair everywhere. But that wasn't even the worst part, because every morning my teeth would look even more yellow than the day before. Like really yellow, even though I was brushing twice a day and using whitening strips. My smile looked dull and almost brown in some spots. "Are you feeling okay?" Hugo asked that night, and something in his voice was different. And despite eating just a box of Tic Tacs every day, I'd gained 5 pounds in 2 weeks. My jeans wouldn't button. My face looked puffy. When I cried to Amelia about it, she came over immediately with this huge bag from Whole Foods. "Okay, intervention time. I've been researching, and I think your hormones are all messed up." She pulled out her blender and started throwing in spinach, berries, and these protein supplements. Trust me, my mom swears by this stuff. Soon, Hugo started making excuses not to hang out, saying he was busy with his internship applications. 2 weeks later, my nails started cracking down the middle and peeling off in layers. I'd gained another 10 pounds. I made an appointment with my doctor, and she did blood work, then called me back in with this expression that made my stomach drop. "With symptoms this severe, we need to rule out some things." Like what? "I don't want you to panic, but we need to check for any masses." I spent the next week getting blood drawn and scans done, Googling my symptoms at 3 a.m. Hugo's texts got shorter and shorter. Amelia came to every appointment, held my hand. When the doctor called me back, I was sure she was about to tell me I was dying. Instead, she looked confused. Everything came back normal. Thyroid, hormones, no masses, no abnormalities. Hugo broke up with me over text. "I need space. This isn't working for me anymore." Blocked on everything. Amelia came over with takeout and tea from a wellness store. It's supposed to help with inflammation. My aunt swears by it. The tea tasted bitter, but I was too exhausted to care. Amelia stayed over and made the tea every morning and night, always insisting on brewing it herself. Then my mom said something weird. "Amelia looks really good lately." I ran into her at Trader Joe's and her skin was glowing. Her hair looked so thick. I thought about it and decided to test the waters. I told her I was doing a juice cleanse and couldn't have outside food for 3 days. Amelia looked annoyed for a second. "Are you sure that's a good idea? You need nutrients." Doctor's orders. For 3 days, I didn't drink her smoothies or tea. And for 3 days, nothing got worse. The hair loss didn't speed up. I didn't gain weight. My skin stayed bad but didn't get worse. On day 4, Amelia showed up with a bottle of vitamin water. "This is just vitamins and water, totally clean for your cleanse." She was pushy about it. I took it, and the second she left, I poured it into a jar and took it to a lab. They called with the results 3 days later. The woman's voice was careful, almost scared. "If you've been ingesting this regularly, you need to see a doctor immediately." I Googled the compounds while she was still talking. Hair loss medication. Another one caused a laxative effect. My best friend since 8th grade had been systematically destroying me for months. I sat in my car staring at the lab results until my hands stopped shaking enough to drive. When I got to her apartment, I didn't knock, just barged in. She was sitting on her couch scrolling when I walked in. "Hey," she said, smiling. "I was just about to text you. I found this new. We need to talk." I held up the lab results. Her smile didn't move, but something flickered in her eyes. "What's that?" "You know what it is." For a second, neither of us moved. Then her face changed. The warmth drained out of it like someone had flipped a switch. "How did you—" She stopped herself. "You tested it. Why?" My voice cracked. "Why would you do this to me?" She stared at me for what felt like forever. Then she laughed. But it wasn't her normal laugh. "Do you really want to know?" I couldn't speak. Couldn't move. Amelia stood up slowly. "Fine. You want the truth? Here it is. Requested Reads is on Spotify now. Check out link in the description or comments." Her face went completely blank. Not shocked, not guilty, just empty. Like someone had turned off a switch inside her head. 3 seconds passed where she just stared at me. And then she laughed. This weird hollow sound that didn't match her face at all. She sat back down on the couch slowly, carefully, like she was thinking about what to say. She folded her hands in her lap and looked up at me with this expression I'd never seen before. "I was just trying to help you because you were falling apart and someone needed to take care of you." The words came out calm, almost reasonable, like she was explaining why she'd picked up my dry cleaning instead of admitting she'd been poisoning me for months. I stood there holding the lab results, my whole body shaking so hard the papers rattled in my hands. My best friend since 8th grade had been systematically destroying my health, and she was sitting there acting like she'd done me a favor. Amelia kept talking, her voice getting sharper, more defensive. "I added supplements to stabilize your stress hormones and help you lose weight because you were letting yourself go." She actually said those words while looking me dead in the eye. "You were gaining weight. Your skin looked bad. You were a mess. I was helping you." I backed toward the door, keeping my phone in my hand, watching her face change from calm to irritated. "We're done," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I expected. I turned and walked out, pulling the door shut behind me, and I didn't look back even though I heard her call my name. I sat in my car outside her building for 10 minutes, hands trembling so hard I could barely hold my phone. I had to try 3 times to unlock the screen because my fingers kept slipping. I took photos of the lab results, every page, making sure the text was clear and readable. Then I opened my camera and switched to voice memo. I hit record and started talking, describing exactly what just happened while the words were still fresh in my mind. My voice sounded weird and shaky on the recording, but I kept going, saying her name, what she admitted, how she justified it, the look on her face. I saved the memo and titled it with today's date. I drove home on autopilot, barely registering the turns or stoplights, just moving through familiar streets while my brain tried to process what had happened. I kept checking my rearview mirror the whole way, paranoid she might follow me, even though her car wasn't there. I got inside my apartment and locked the door behind me, then checked the lock twice to make sure it caught. I called my mom before I could overthink it. When she answered, I kept it simple. Amelia has been putting things in my drinks that made me sick. I have lab proof. I'm safe now. There was silence on the other end for a few seconds. She wanted to drive up immediately. I could hear it in her voice, all the questions trying to come out at once. I told her I needed to handle some things first, and I'd call her tomorrow. She made me promise I was really safe, that I'd lock my doors, that I'd call if anything changed. I promised and hung up before she could ask more questions. I didn't want to contaminate my memory with her reactions, or have to explain things I was still trying to understand myself. I opened my laptop and pulled up a blank document. I typed out everything Amelia said in her apartment, every word I could remember, exactly as she said it. The timestamps of when I arrived and left, the look on her face, how she sat down, the tone of her voice when she said I was letting myself go. My hands were steadier when I was typing than when I was just sitting still, like having a task gave me something to focus on besides the panic. I saved the document 3 times in different folders on my computer. Then I saved it to a USB drive I kept in my desk drawer. Then I emailed it to myself with the subject line, "Statement, do not delete," and marked it as important. I went through my bathroom first, pulling open the medicine cabinet and the drawers under the sink. The tea bags Amelia brought over, still in their box on the counter. I threw them in a trash bag, the protein powder from that Whole Foods trip, barely used, into the bag. I moved to the kitchen and found the vitamin water bottles still in my fridge, 3 of them lined up on the top shelf, all in the bag. The reusable smoothie cup she bought me with the metal straw, sitting clean in my dish rack. I hesitated for a second because it was expensive, then threw it away too. I couldn't keep anything her hands had touched. When the bag was full, I tied it shut and set it by the door to take out later. Then I went back to the bathroom and stood under the light. I took photos of my hair, pulling sections forward to show how thin it had gotten at the temples, close-ups of my yellow teeth in the mirror, the brown spots visible even in the phone camera, my cracked nails, the splits running down the middle. I saved them all in a folder on my phone labeled with today's date. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face when she said she was helping me. That calm expression like poisoning someone was a reasonable thing to do. I kept replaying moments from the past few months. Her in my kitchen making tea, insisting on brewing it herself, saying her aunt swore by this brand, her showing up with smoothies and acting concerned when I said I wasn't hungry, her at my doctor appointments, holding my hand while I got bad news, knowing the whole time she was causing it. Around 4 a.m., I gave up on sleep and just lay there staring at the ceiling. My mind raced through every smoothie, every cup of tea, every time she said she was worried about me. The way she'd looked so healthy lately while I got worse. How she always had an explanation ready, always sounded so caring and concerned. I felt sick thinking about how long she'd been doing this, how many times I'd thanked her for taking care of me. At 8 a.m., I called the urgent care clinic near campus. The receptionist answered on the second ring, and I explained I needed to see someone today about possible poisoning. My voice sounded more normal than I expected, just tired and flat. The receptionist's voice changed immediately, got very serious. She put me on hold and I listened to generic waiting music for what felt like forever. When she came back, she said they had an opening at 11 and asked if that worked. I said yes, and she took my information. I showered and got dressed like I was going to court, wanting to look put together and believable. I picked clothes that were neat and clean, nothing too casual. I wanted the doctor to take me seriously, to see that I wasn't making this up or being dramatic. Before I left for urgent care, I pulled up Amelia's contact in my phone. I typed out just 4 words. Do not contact me. I hit send and watched the message go through. Then I blocked her number. Blocked her on Instagram. Blocked her on Facebook, Snapchat, everywhere I could think of. Each block felt like closing a door, shutting her out piece by piece. My hands were shaking less by the time I was done, like taking action made me feel more in control. I grabbed my purse and the folder with all my evidence and headed out. The urgent care doctor was a woman in her 40s with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She listened to everything without interrupting, and her face got more concerned with each symptom I described. I showed her the lab results from the bottle testing, and she read through them carefully, her eyebrows pulling together. She examined my hair, running her fingers gently over my scalp and looking at the thinning spots. She checked my teeth, shining a light in my mouth and making notes on her tablet. She looked at my nails, touching the cracks carefully. She took photos of everything for my chart, explaining what she was documenting as she went. She said she was referring me to a toxicology specialist at the hospital, and that I needed to see them as soon as possible. She pulled out labeled bags and collected samples of my hair and nail clippings, writing my name and the date on each one in careful handwriting. She wrote everything down in detail, every symptom, every timeline point, making sure my medical record showed exactly what had happened. I sat in my car in the urgent care parking lot and pulled out my phone. My hands were still shaking a little, but I managed to dial the non-emergency police line. The operator answered after 2 rings and asked what I needed to report. I explained that I had evidence someone had been putting harmful substances in my drinks over several months, and that I had lab results proving it. She asked if I was in immediate danger right now, and I said no. The person didn't know I had discovered what they'd done yet. She took down my name, phone number, and address, then gave me an incident number to write down. She said an officer would call me back within 24 hours to take a full report, and I should keep all my evidence safe. I thanked her and hung up, then sat there for a minute staring at the incident number on my phone screen. It felt real now, official, like I was actually doing something about this instead of just being scared. I opened my messages and pulled up my study group chat. I typed out a quick message saying I needed to miss our session this week because of a family thing, keeping it super vague. Amelia knew most of my friends and I didn't know who I could trust anymore, or who she might have talked to. My classmate Jordan responded almost immediately with just a thumbs up emoji. No questions, no pushback, just simple acceptance. I felt grateful for that small thing. I started my car and drove toward Amelia's apartment building without really thinking about it. I parked across the street and sat there watching her building for a few minutes. What was I even doing here? I didn't have a plan, didn't know what I thought would happen. This was stupid. I started the car again and drove away, feeling foolish. But then I remembered something. That huge bag from Whole Foods she'd brought over months ago with the blender and all those supplements. I still had some of those containers. I'd thrown most of it away yesterday, but some of the empties were probably still in my trash. I drove straight home and went directly to my kitchen trash can. I dug through coffee grounds and food scraps until I found 3 empty supplement containers near the bottom. I washed them off in the sink and laid them on my counter. I grabbed my phone and photographed every single label from multiple angles. I zoomed in on the ingredient lists, the lot numbers, the expiration dates, the brand names. I took close-ups of the nutrition facts panels. I photographed the barcodes. I wanted every detail documented. Then I put the containers in a plastic bag and stored them in my closet where they'd be safe. I sat down at my laptop and logged into the patient portal for the urgent care clinic. I found the option to message my doctor and started typing. I attached the lab report from the bottle testing as a PDF and wrote a brief message asking her to add it to my medical chart. I explained that this was the evidence of what had been causing my symptoms and that I wanted it documented officially. I hit send and closed my laptop. Within an hour, she responded. Her message said she'd added the report to my chart and flagged it as important for my toxicology referral. She said I should hear from the hospital soon. I felt another wave of relief at having one more piece of documentation in place. The next morning, my phone rang while I was making coffee. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize with a local area code. I answered, and a woman's voice said she was Detective Sue Park from campus police. She asked if I could come in to make a formal report about the incident I'd called about yesterday. I said yes immediately, and she gave me the address of the campus police station and said to come in this afternoon if possible. I spent the next few hours getting everything ready. I printed out copies of the lab results from the bottle testing. I printed my timeline that I'd typed up the night I confronted Amelia. I printed the photos of the supplement containers with all their labels visible. I found the voice memo I'd recorded in my car and transcribed it word for word, then printed that too. I organized everything in a folder with sections labeled clearly. At 2 p.m., I walked into the campus police station. Detective Park met me in the lobby and led me to a small interview room. She was younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. She had a kind face but serious eyes. She sat down across from me and pulled out a notepad. I handed her my folder and she opened it, looking through each section carefully. Then she looked up at me and said to start from the beginning. I explained everything without her interrupting once. I told her about my symptoms starting months ago, about Amelia always being there with smoothies and tea, about the juice cleanse test, about getting the vitamin water tested. I showed her the timeline, the lab results, the photos. I played her the transcribed voice memo from my confrontation with Amelia. Detective Park wrote notes the entire time, her pen moving quickly across the page. When I finished, she asked a few clarifying questions about dates and times. She asked if I had any of the actual products Amelia had given me. I told her about the supplement containers at home, and she said to bring those in as evidence. She explained that she'd be opening an official investigation and would need to interview Amelia as well. Her tone was professional, but I could see concern in her eyes. She said she'd be in touch soon and gave me her direct number. I walked out of the police station feeling lighter somehow, like I'd handed off some of the weight I'd been carrying. I drove straight from the police station to the hardware store. I walked up and down the aisles until I found the lock section. I picked out a new deadbolt and a new handle lock for my apartment door, the kind that needed a key from both sides. The package said they were pick resistant. I paid and drove home. I pulled up YouTube on my phone and found a video tutorial on installing door locks. I spent the next hour following along, unscrewing the old locks and installing the new ones. My hands got tired and I stripped one of the screws and had to start over, but eventually I got both locks in place. I tested them multiple times, locking and unlocking from both sides. They felt solid and secure. Then I sat down with my laptop and went through every single online account I had. I turned off location sharing on my phone, on Instagram, on Facebook, on Snapchat, everywhere. I enabled two-factor authentication on my email, my banking apps, my social media. I changed every password to something completely random that Amelia couldn't possibly guess. I used a password manager to keep track of them all. It took almost 2 hours, but by the time I was done, I felt like I'd locked her out of my digital life the same way I'd locked her out of my physical space. 2 days later, my phone rang while I was studying. The caller ID said it was from the hospital. I answered, and a man's voice introduced himself as Wesley Palmer from the toxicology department. He said my referral had come through from urgent care, and he had an appointment available next week if that worked for me. His voice was calm and steady, very professional, like he dealt with situations like mine on a regular basis. That somehow made me feel less crazy, less alone. I said yes to the appointment, and he asked me to bring any remaining products or containers that might have been involved. I told him I had some empty supplement containers, and he said those would be helpful. He gave me the date and time and the building location. After we hung up, I added the appointment to my calendar and felt grateful that things were moving forward. I called the campus counseling center next because I hadn't been sleeping, and I kept having panic attacks in random places. The receptionist asked some basic questions and scheduled me for an intake appointment with Quinn Hardy for later that week. She asked what I wanted to address in counseling, and I said I was dealing with trauma from a friend hurting me. She didn't ask for details, just confirmed my appointment time. That night, I was lying in bed scrolling through my phone when a text came through from Hugo. It was the first time he'd contacted me since the breakup. The message just said he'd heard I was going through something and hoped I was okay. I stared at those words for a long time. His message was so distant and careful, like I was a stranger he barely knew instead of someone he'd dated for over a year. It hit me hard that he'd abandoned me when I needed him most, that he'd walked away when I was sick and scared and had no idea what was happening to my body. He hadn't checked on me, hadn't asked questions, had just decided I was too much trouble and blocked me everywhere. And now he was sending this careful, distant message like it meant something. I didn't respond. I just stared at the text for a while, feeling anger mixed with sadness. Then I deleted the entire thread. I didn't want his words in my phone anymore. My phone lit up the next morning with a message from Jordan. She'd sent me screenshots with a message saying I should see what Amelia was posting. I opened the images and felt my chest get tight. Amelia had posted multiple Instagram stories about being a concerned friend who'd tried to help someone with an eating disorder. She was framing the whole thing like she'd been nothing but supportive, and was now being accused of terrible things by someone who was mentally unstable. She was making herself the victim. She was telling everyone, our mutual friends, that I had serious issues, and was lashing out at the people trying to help me. I felt rage burn through my chest, hot and sharp. My hands were shaking as I screenshotted every single story before they disappeared. I wanted to respond, wanted to post my own story with the lab results and the truth, wanted to defend myself publicly, but I remembered what Detective Park had said about documentation and not engaging. I saved all the screenshots to my evidence folder instead. I didn't post anything, didn't comment, didn't react where Amelia could see. I just added it to the growing pile of proof that showed exactly who she really was. The next morning, I walked into Constance Dale's office in the academic advising building and sat down across from her desk. I explained I needed to apply for incompletes in 2 of my classes because of a medical situation, keeping my voice steady and professional. She looked at me for a second, then nodded and pulled up the forms on her computer without asking for details. She walked me through each section of the paperwork, explaining deadlines and requirements in this calm, matter-of-fact way that made me feel less embarrassed about the whole thing. It was hard to admit I couldn't handle my normal course load, that I was falling behind because of what Amelia did to me, but Constance made it feel practical instead of shameful. She printed the forms and showed me where to sign, then explained I'd have until next semester to complete the work. I thanked her and left, feeling like at least one thing was handled, one problem solved. 3 days later, I sat in Wesley Palmer's office at the hospital toxicology department with the lab report from the bottle sitting on the desk between us. He reviewed it carefully, his eyes moving across the page while I waited, my hands folded in my lap to keep them from shaking. He started explaining how the compounds would affect my body over time, using simple language and pointing to specific lines in the report. The hair loss medication would definitely cause my symptoms, he said, and the laxatives would explain the weight changes and digestive problems I'd been having. He talked about dosage and frequency, about how long these substances stay in your system, about the timeline of damage. Hearing a medical professional confirm it all made it real in a way that scared me, but also felt good, like someone finally believed me. He said my body would recover over time now that I wasn't ingesting the compounds anymore, but the process would be slow. I asked about permanent damage and he said most of it should reverse, but he couldn't make promises. I left his office with a copy of his report and added it to my evidence folder in the car. Detective Park called 2 days later and asked me to come in for a follow-up interview. I grabbed the supplement containers I'd photographed and drove to the campus police station, parking in the visitor lot and walking inside with my bag of evidence. She met me in the same interview room as before, and I laid everything out on the table between us. She picked up each container, read the labels, took photos with her department camera. Then she explained the investigation process in this careful tone that made my stomach tight. She said cases like this are hard to prosecute because you have to prove intent, and Amelia could claim she thought she was helping me. I handed over the bottle from the lab, my written timeline, all my medical records, everything I had collected. Detective Park organized it all into evidence bags and labeled each one, but her face looked concerned. She said the evidence was strong, but the prosecutor would make the final call about charges. I tried not to think too hard about what difficult to prosecute really meant as I walked back to my car. My second counseling session with Quinn started with her asking how I was sleeping and eating. I admitted I was having panic attacks in random places, and she nodded like she expected that. She taught me this grounding technique for when I feel panic rising, something called the 5-4-3-2-1 method. We practiced it together in her office, with me naming 5 things I could see, 4 things I could touch, 3 things I could hear, 2 things I could feel, could smell, and 1 thing I could taste. It felt silly sitting there listing off desk, chair, plant, poster, clock while she watched, but I wrote it all down in my notebook anyway. She made me practice it 3 more times until I could do it without looking at my notes. I was desperate for any tool that might help when my chest gets tight and my vision goes spotty, so I took it seriously, even though it seemed too simple to actually work. Quinn said the technique interrupts the panic response and brings you back to the present moment. I left with the steps written on a card in my wallet. That night, my mom called and said I should come home and stay with family for a while. Her voice was worried, and she kept saying I didn't need to handle this alone, that I could take time off school and recover. I told her I needed to stay near campus for medical appointments and meetings with police, that running away wouldn't make me feel safer. She got quiet for a long time, and I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. Then she said she was proud of me for handling it, for being strong and practical, and her voice cracked on the last word. That made me start crying, sitting on my couch with the phone pressed to my ear, because I didn't feel strong at all. I felt scared and tired and like everything was too much. But I thanked her and we talked for another 20 minutes about normal things, about her garden and my dad's work project, until I felt calmer. The dentist appointment was the next morning, and I sat in the chair while she examined my teeth with that little mirror tool. She went very still after a minute, her face changing in a way that made my stomach drop. She rolled her chair back and explained the enamel damage was bad, really bad, and would need treatments over months or maybe years to fix. She showed me x-rays on her computer screen, pointing to spots where the enamel had worn away, and the tooth underneath was exposed. The treatment plan she laid out involved multiple procedures, special treatments, probably some crowns eventually. Then she printed a cost estimate and handed it to me, and I stared at the number at the bottom. Thousands of dollars. Way more than I had in my savings account. More than I could afford even with payment plans. She was kind about it and said we could work something out, but I left that office feeling sick about the money on top of everything else. I walked into the campus legal aid office the next afternoon and asked the receptionist if I could talk to someone about getting a protection order. She gave me a form to fill out, and 20 minutes later, a law student named Lydia Pope called me back to a small office. She was doing her clinic rotation, and she listened while I explained the whole situation, then asked to see my evidence. I pulled out my 3-ring binder, and she went through it page by page, reading the lab results and medical reports and timeline. She said I had a strong case for civil court even if criminal charges didn't happen, which was good to hear after Detective Park's warnings. We started filling out the protection order paperwork together, with her explaining each section and what I needed to write. It took over an hour to complete everything, but Lydia was patient and thorough. She made copies of all my evidence to attach to the filing and said we'd submit it to the courthouse tomorrow. I left feeling like I was finally doing something active to protect myself, instead of just reacting to what Amelia did. My group chat with friends from freshman year had been quiet since someone mentioned Amelia a few days ago. I opened it that night and scrolled through, noticing people were leaving one by one with no explanations or goodbyes. First Sarah's name disappeared, then Mike's, then 3 more people I'd known since orientation. By the end of the week, it was just me, Jordan, and 1 other person, and nobody was posting anymore. The silence hurt more than I expected because these were people I'd spent 2 years hanging out with, people I thought were my friends. I realized Amelia must have been talking to them, spinning her version of events, and they'd chosen to believe her instead of asking me what happened. I closed the chat and didn't open it again. I spent an evening going through my bank statements to track any weird charges, looking for patterns or anything suspicious. I was scrolling through transaction histories when I remembered Amelia's Venmo was public. I opened the app and found her profile, then started scrolling through her payment history. Every single week for the past 6 months, she'd been buying herbal tea supplies and wellness supplements, the payments all labeled with little plant emojis and notes about self-care. I took screenshots of everything, my hands steady as I captured each transaction. The pattern was so clear, so organized, like she'd been planning this systematically the whole time. I added all the screenshots to my evidence folder on my laptop, feeling this cold satisfaction at having one more piece of proof. The documentation felt powerful, like I was building something solid that couldn't be argued away. Quinn suggested in our next session that I write out a complete statement of what happened, something organized and clear that I could use for legal proceedings. We spent the whole hour working on it together, with me typing on my laptop while she helped me structure the information. She showed me how to edit out the emotional parts and focus on facts, timeline, and evidence instead. We organized it into sections with dates and specific incidents, making it read like a report instead of a story. Every time I started adding how I felt or what I was thinking, Quinn would say to save that for therapy and stick to what actually happened. By the end of the session, I had 3 pages of clean, clear paragraphs that laid out everything in order. I saved multiple copies and emailed it to myself with a subject line I'd remember. Having it written down like that, all neat and organized, made me feel more in control than I had in weeks. 3 days later, I came home from the library around 7 p.m. and found a folded piece of notebook paper taped to my apartment door. My stomach dropped before I even touched it because I recognized Amelia's handwriting on the front where she'd written my name in purple pen. I pulled out my phone and took 3 photos of it still taped to the door from different angles, making sure the timestamp and my door number were visible. Then I peeled it off carefully and unfolded it. The note said, "Please just talk to me, I can explain everything," in her loopy handwriting with a sad face drawn at the bottom. My hands started shaking so hard I had to lean against the door frame. I took more photos of the unfolded note, then went inside and locked both locks behind me. I called Detective Park immediately and she answered on the second ring. I told her about the note and she asked me to read it word for word, which I did while my voice came out all tight and scared. She said she'd handle it and to save the note as evidence. I hung up and sat on my couch staring at that stupid, sad face Amelia had drawn, feeling angry instead of sad for once. Detective Park called me back the next morning while I was eating cereal and said she'd just gotten off the phone with Amelia. She explained she'd given Amelia a formal warning that any further contact with me would be documented and could be used against her in court. I asked what Amelia said, and Detective Park paused before telling me that Amelia had cried during the call and kept saying she just wanted to apologize. Hearing that made me so angry I had to put my spoon down because my hand was clenching too hard. Detective Park said Amelia claimed she was only trying to say sorry and didn't understand why she couldn't explain herself. I thanked Detective Park for calling her and we hung up. I dumped the rest of my cereal in the sink because I couldn't eat anymore, my stomach all twisted up with rage at Amelia still playing the victim. That afternoon, I drove to the wellness store on Maple Street where I remembered Amelia saying she bought the tea supplies. The store smelled like incense and had wooden shelves full of glass jars with dried herbs. I found the manager at the register, a woman in her 50s with gray hair and a braid, and explained I was trying to get purchase records for someone who bought products there. She listened carefully while I talked, her face getting more sympathetic, but then she shook her head. She said their privacy policy prevented them from sharing customer purchase data without a subpoena from a court. I felt frustration rise in my chest, but I understood what she meant. I told her I got it and that the same rules protecting Amelia also protected everyone else who shopped there. She nodded and said she was sorry she couldn't help more. I left feeling defeated, but also weirdly okay with it, because at least the rules were fair even when they didn't help me. My counseling appointment with Quinn was scheduled for Thursday at 3 p.m. and I showed up 10 minutes early. We spent the whole session talking about grief, which felt strange because Amelia wasn't dead, but the person I thought she was had never really existed. Quinn explained that mourning a living person was actually common in situations like mine. We talked about how I was grieving the friendship I thought I had for 8 years, all those memories now feeling fake and poisoned. Then Quinn had me practice setting boundaries out loud, making me say, "I will not discuss this with you," over and over, until it felt natural coming out of my mouth. She made me try different tones, different volumes, until I could say it firmly without my voice shaking. By the end of the session, I felt completely drained, like I'd run a marathon, but also clearer about what I needed to do. I drove home in silence with the radio off, just processing everything. When I got back to my apartment, I checked my email and found a message from Constance with the subject line, "Incomplete forms approved." I opened it immediately, and read that my incompletes for both classes were officially approved and my finals were rescheduled for next semester. Relief washed over me so strong I actually felt tears in my eyes. I wouldn't fail out. I was behind and stressed, but I had time to catch up now. The email felt like someone finally believing that what happened to me was real and serious enough to deserve help. I printed the email and added it to my evidence folder, then sat at my kitchen table just breathing for a few minutes and feeling grateful. 2 days later, a thick envelope arrived in my mailbox from the hospital with Wesley Palmer's return address. I opened it in my car and pulled out a formal letter on the hospital letterhead. Wesley had written a detailed summary of his findings, explaining that the compounds in the vitamin water bottle were consistent with my symptoms of hair loss, tooth discoloration, weight gain, and nail damage. He stated the timeline matched the progression of my health decline over the months Amelia had been giving me drinks. He included specific information about dosages and how they would cause the effects I experienced. I read the letter 3 times sitting there in the parking lot. Having a medical professional document everything in official language made it feel validated and real, but it also made me deeply sad that I needed a formal letter to prove my best friend had hurt me. I folded it carefully and drove home to add it to my binder. That night, I got a text from someone I knew from sophomore year, a girl named Michelle who was in my statistics class. The text said, "Amelia asked me to send you this," with a voice memo attached. My hands went cold, but I opened it anyway. Amelia's voice came through my phone speakers sounding shaky and apologetic, saying she was sorry and she'd been so stressed about her own life and just wanted to help me. She blamed her anxiety and said she thought she was helping me get healthy by giving me supplements. Her voice broke like she was crying, and she said she never meant to hurt me. I listened to the whole thing once, feeling nothing but cold anger, then saved the audio file to 3 different places as evidence. I texted Michelle back saying if she was going to be Amelia's messenger, then she needed to block my number. Michelle didn't respond, and I didn't care. The next morning, Lydia and I met at the courthouse at 9 a.m. to file for the civil protection order. I brought my 3-ring binder with everything organized in tabs, the whole thing probably 2 inches thick with evidence. We went to the clerk's window, and Lydia helped me submit all the documents, including the lab results, photos of my symptoms showing my hair loss, and damaged nails and yellow teeth, my written timeline of events, the Venmo screenshots of Amelia's purchases, Wesley's formal letter, and my typed statement. The clerk processed everything methodically, stamping pages and making copies, then handed me a receipt and said the hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks out on November 18th. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt like I'd actually done something concrete to protect myself, instead of just reacting to what Amelia kept doing to me. That night, I was sitting on my couch trying to watch TV when my chest suddenly got tight, and my vision started going spotty around the edges. I couldn't catch my breath, and my heart was racing, so fast I thought something was seriously wrong. I managed to get to my bathroom and sat down on the floor with my back against the tub. I forced myself to do the grounding technique Quinn taught me, naming 5 things I could see out loud even though my voice was shaking. White tiles, blue towel, silver faucet, green soap bottle, black bath mat, then 4 things I could touch, 3 things I could hear. My breathing started slowing down after about 20 minutes of working through it. I stayed on the bathroom floor until my heart rate felt normal again. Getting through the panic attack without calling anyone or going to the hospital felt like a small victory, like maybe I was getting stronger at handling this. Detective Park called me 2 days later while I was making lunch, and I answered hoping for good news. Instead, my stomach sank as she explained that the prosecutor had reviewed all the evidence and didn't think they could get criminal charges to stick. She said without proof that Amelia intended to cause harm, and with Amelia framing everything as misguided help, they couldn't prove criminal intent beyond reasonable doubt. Detective Park's voice sounded genuinely sorry when she said the civil protection order was my best path forward now. I thanked her for everything she'd done and told her I understood before hanging up. Then I sat at my kitchen table and cried for 10 minutes, letting myself feel disappointed and angry before pulling myself together again. 2 days later, I met Lydia at a coffee shop downtown to prep for the hearing. She brought a yellow legal pad covered in notes, and we sat in a corner booth away from other people. She walked me through the process step by step, explaining how I'd be called to testify first and what questions the judge would likely ask. She taught me to answer clearly and briefly, to look at the judge when I spoke, to pause if I needed water or a moment to collect myself. We practiced my statement 3 times, with Lydia playing the judge and asking follow-up questions. The first run through my voice shook so badly I had to stop twice. The second time was better. By the 3rd time, I could get through most of it without my hands trembling too much. Lydia said I was ready, that I just needed to stay calm and stick to the facts. Walking back to my car, I felt more prepared but also more nervous, like the hearing was suddenly very real and very soon. The next morning, I took my first rescheduled exam in a classroom that smelled like old textbooks and floor cleaner. I sat down at a desk near the back and opened the test booklet when the professor said to begin. The questions looked familiar from my studying, but when I tried to focus on them, my brain felt foggy and slow. I'd read a question 3 times and still not understand what it was asking. Halfway through, I realized I'd been staring at the same problem for 5 minutes without writing anything down. My hand was shaking when I finally started writing answers, and I could feel myself losing my train of thought mid-sentence. I knew the material, I'd studied it, but I couldn't pull the information out of my head when I needed it. I finished the exam 10 minutes before time was up and turned it in, but walking out of that classroom, I knew I hadn't done well. The defeat sat heavy in my chest, but I also felt determined not to let this destroy my entire semester. I'd retake it if I had to. That afternoon, I had a follow-up appointment with my dentist to discuss treatment options. She pulled up the images of my teeth on her computer screen and walked me through what needed to be done. Multiple cleanings, some bonding work, possibly veneers on the front teeth where the damage was worst. The timeline would be months, maybe over a year depending on how my teeth responded to treatment. Then she pulled up the cost estimate and my stomach dropped. Even with my insurance, it was going to be thousands of dollars. I sat there staring at the numbers on the screen, feeling sick. The dentist must have seen my face because she suggested a payment plan, spreading the cost over 2 years with monthly installments I could maybe afford. I signed the paperwork right there, committing to payments that would stretch well into my future. She was kind about it, saying she'd seen similar enamel damage in patients with eating disorders, and that it was treatable. She didn't know mine was inflicted by someone else, and I didn't correct her. The next day, Wesley emailed me an addendum to his toxicology report. He'd done additional analysis on the timeline, cross-referencing my symptom progression with the likely accumulation of compounds in my system. The addendum clarified that based on the severity and pattern of my symptoms, I must have been ingesting these substances regularly over a period of months, not just once or twice. The detail was technical, but the conclusion was clear. This wasn't an accident or a one-time thing. This was systematic and prolonged. I forwarded the email to Lydia immediately, and she responded within minutes with just a thumbs-up emoji. But I knew what it meant. The case was stronger now. That same afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Hugo. It said he'd heard I was dealing with some stuff and wanted to know if I wanted to get coffee and talk. I stared at the message for a long time, sitting on my couch with my phone in my hands. I thought about all those weeks when I was falling apart and he just pulled away, making excuses about being busy with internship applications. I thought about how he broke up with me over text and then blocked me everywhere. And now he wanted to talk, now that the worst of it was visible and public and he could position himself as supportive. I typed back a simple response. No thanks, I'm good. Hitting send felt powerful, like I was choosing myself over someone who couldn't choose me when I actually needed him. He didn't respond, and I didn't expect him to. The next morning, I woke up to my phone blowing up with Instagram notifications. One of Amelia's friends had posted a story with crying emojis and text about false accusations ruining innocent lives. I wasn't tagged, but people started tagging me in the comments, asking if this was about my situation. Friends of friends I barely knew were suddenly in my mentions, some supportive and some clearly taking Amelia's side. My first instinct was to post my own response, to defend myself publicly, and set the record straight. I started typing out a statement 3 different times and deleted it each time. Lydia had been clear about not engaging on social media, about keeping everything documented and formal for court. So instead, I just muted all the notifications and closed the app. Let them think whatever they wanted to think. The people who mattered knew the truth. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep, so I got up and organized my binder one more time. Every tab was already labeled and every document was already in order, but I went through it all anyway. Lab results, photos, timeline, Venmo screenshots, medical records, Wesley's report, and addendum. Everything was there. Everything was perfect. Then I went to my bathroom and stood in front of the mirror with my printed statement. I read it out loud, forcing myself to maintain eye contact with my own reflection. My voice shook on the first run-through, better on the second. By the third time, I could get through most of it with only minor trembling. I practiced looking up periodically like Lydia taught me, practiced pausing for water, practiced staying calm even when my heart was racing. It was past midnight when I finally went back to bed. The morning of the hearing, I woke up at 6 and spent an hour picking out clothes. I settled on dark pants and a plain sweater. Nothing flashy or attention-seeking, the kind of outfit my mom would approve of for something serious. I left my apartment at 8, even though the hearing wasn't until 10, needing the extra time to feel prepared. The courthouse was downtown in this big old building with marble floors and high ceilings that made every sound echo. People in suits rushed past me talking on phones and carrying briefcases. I found the courtroom number on the directory and then sat on a wooden bench outside, clutching my binder. My hands were shaking, so I used the grounding technique Quinn taught me. I named 5 things I could see: marble floor, wooden bench, metal door handle, fluorescent lights, exit sign. 4 things I could touch. 3 things I could hear. My breathing slowed a little, but my hands were still trembling when they called us in. Inside the courtroom, I sat at a table with Lydia, while Amelia sat at another table with her lawyer across from us. The judge was an older woman with gray hair and reading glasses. When she called my name, I stood up on shaky legs and walked to the witness stand. The clerk had me place my hand on a Bible and swear to tell the truth. My voice sounded small in the big room, but I said I did. Then I pulled out my statement and started reading. I looked up at the judge periodically like Lydia taught me, making eye contact and then looking back down at my paper. My voice cracked twice, and I had to pause once to take a drink of water from the cup they provided. But I got through it. All of it. Every detail about the symptoms and the lab results and the timeline. When I finished, the judge asked if I had exhibits, and Lydia helped me submit everything from my binder. The judge accepted it all into evidence, marking each document with a number. Then it was Amelia's turn, and I had to sit there and listen to her testify. She positioned herself as a concerned friend who was just trying to help me through what she thought was an eating disorder and severe stress. She admitted giving me the supplements and tea, but insisted she thought they were harmless wellness products, things her mom used and recommended. She said she was worried about me because I was clearly falling apart and she just wanted to help. Her voice got shaky when she talked about our friendship and how much she cared about me. She even cried, real tears running down her face, and it looked genuine enough that I wondered if the judge believed her. Sitting there listening to her twist everything into a story where she was the hero trying to save me, I felt my anger shift into something cold and clear and focused. She was good at this, at making herself look innocent and caring. But I had the evidence and the timeline and the medical reports. I had the truth, even if she could cry on command. The judge flips through the papers in front of her for what feels like 10 minutes but is probably only 2. She adjusts her glasses and looks up at me, then at Amelia, then back down at the documents. My hands are gripping the edge of the table so hard my knuckles are white. She clears her throat and says the evidence shows clear harm, documented medical damage, and a pattern of behavior that warrants protection regardless of intent. She's granting a protection order for 12 months with no contact allowed, direct or indirect. It's not criminal charges, but it's real and legal and enforceable. I feel something loosen in my chest, but I'm too exhausted to feel relieved yet. The judge explains the terms, says Amelia cannot contact me in any way, cannot come within 500 feet of me, and if she violates it, there will be consequences. Amelia's lawyer nods and writes things down. Amelia just sits there staring at the table. The judge asks if I understand the terms, and I say yes, my voice coming out steadier than I expected. She signs the papers and hands copies to both lawyers and tells us we're dismissed. I walk out of the courtroom and Lydia catches up with me in the hallway. She says she has another hearing in 20 minutes, but she wanted to make sure I was okay first. I tell her I'm fine, just tired, and thank her for everything. She squeezes my shoulder and says to call her if I need anything, then rushes off toward another courtroom. I walk to my car alone, my legs feeling shaky now that the adrenaline is wearing off. I sit in the driver's seat for a few minutes, just breathing, staring at the steering wheel. My phone is in my hand and I type out a text to my mom. It's done. I got the order. I hit send and immediately my phone starts ringing with her name on the screen. I stare at it for 3 rings and then decline the call. I need to just sit here in the quiet for a minute, not talk to anyone or explain anything. The relief is there, but it's mixed with this weird empty feeling, like I won something but I'm not sure what the prize is. I start the car and drive home, watching the courthouse get smaller in my rearview mirror. 2 days later, I'm sitting in a dermatologist's office filling out intake forms. This doctor specializes in hair and nail damage according to the referral Wesley gave me. She calls me back and examines my scalp under a bright light, taking photos and making notes. She asks about the timeline and I explain about the hair loss medication in the drinks. She nods like she's seen this before and says the hair loss will likely reverse over the next 6 to 12 months as the medication works its way out of my system. My nails will take months to fully recover too, she says. Maybe 4 to 6 months before they look normal again. She's very matter-of-fact about it. No false optimism or promises, just realistic timelines based on medical facts. I appreciate that more than I expected. She writes down a treatment plan and some supplements that might help speed things up a little, then schedules a follow-up in 3 months to check progress. Walking out, I feel like at least I have a roadmap now, even if it's a long one. In my counseling session with Quinn that week, we talk about complicated grief. She explains that I'm mourning the friendship while also being angry at the person, missing who I thought Amelia was while hating what she actually did. It's confusing because both feelings are real at the same time. We map out what my new normal might look like, what my life will be without Amelia in it after 8 years of friendship. Quinn asks me what I'm afraid of, and I say, I'm afraid of trusting people again, afraid of being that wrong about someone. She says that's normal and we'll work on it. But she also says accepting what happened doesn't mean being okay with it. Those are 2 different things. I can acknowledge the reality without forgiving it or moving past it quickly. That distinction helps somehow. Gives me permission to still be angry while also trying to move forward. I leave feeling a little less tangled up inside. I meet with Constance in her office and she pulls up my academic records on her computer. She confirms the semester adjustments are in place, and while my GPA took a hit, my degree path is still intact. I can still graduate on time if I stay on track next semester. She helps me plan out my schedule for next term with a lighter course load, just 12 credits instead of my usual 16. She says I can rebuild my academic standing over time, that one bad semester doesn't define my whole college career. It's not the perfect outcome, but it's workable. I thank her and she prints out the plan for me to keep. Walking across campus afterward, I feel like at least one part of my life is still salvageable. Detective Park calls me 3 days later and I answer on the second ring. She says she's officially closing the case, explaining again that the evidence doesn't meet the standard for criminal prosecution. Her voice sounds genuinely sorry when she says she wishes the system worked differently, that there should be better options for cases like mine. I tell her I understand and I mean it. I thank her for trying, for taking me seriously, for doing what she could within the limits she had. She says if anything else happens to call her immediately, especially any violations of the protection order. I save her number in my phone under Detective Park and hope I never have to use it again. The next Monday, I start going to a different coffee shop on the other side of campus, one I've never been to with Amelia. I change my schedule so I'm not walking the same routes at the same times anymore. It feels paranoid but also practical. The protection order is just paper, and I'd rather avoid Amelia completely than test whether it actually works. I take different paths to class, eat lunch at different times, study in the library instead of the student center. My whole routine shifts and it's exhausting to think about every movement this way, but it also feels safer. That weekend, I'm cleaning my closet and I find an old hoodie of Amelia's shoved in the back. It's from sophomore year when she stayed over during a snowstorm. I pull it out and just stare at it for a minute. This gray hoodie with her college logo on it. I box it up in a shopping bag and drive to campus. The lost and found is in the student center basement, and I walk in and hand the bag to the worker at the desk. She doesn't ask any questions, just takes it and writes down the date on a form. It's a tiny ritual of ending, getting rid of the last physical reminder of Amelia in my space. Walking out, I feel lighter somehow. The first dental bill installment comes in the mail, and I open it sitting at my kitchen table. The number makes my stomach clench, but I get out my laptop and log into my bank account. I pay it from my savings and watch my balance drop by $300. It stings, but I don't spiral into blaming myself or feeling stupid. This cost is something that happened to me, not something I caused. The distinction feels important. I close my laptop and make dinner, refusing to let the bill ruin my whole evening. 10 weeks after everything started, I'm getting ready for class, and I notice something in the bathroom mirror. There are baby hairs growing in at my temples, tiny fuzzy new growth that wasn't there before. I lean in closer and touch them gently. My nails are still damaged, but they're not cracking as badly when I type or open things. My teeth haven't gotten any more yellow. They're just staying at the same level of discoloration. The improvements are small and slow, but they're real, actual visible proof that my body is recovering. I take a photo in the mirror to document it, adding it to my recovery folder. It's not dramatic or life-changing, but it's something, and right now something is enough. 3 days later, I'm walking across the quad toward my afternoon class when I spot that purple backpack in a crowd near the student center. My chest tightens immediately and my hands go cold, but I force myself to keep my eyes forward and adjust my path toward the library instead. I don't look back to see if she noticed me. I don't speed up or slow down. I just walk at my normal pace and focus on the concrete path under my feet, counting my steps until I'm inside the library doors. The whole thing takes maybe 2 minutes, but my heart is pounding when I get to the third-floor study area. I sit down at a table and open my laptop, waiting for my breathing to even out. Not engaging with her felt like something I chose to do, not something fear made me do, and that difference actually matters to me. That evening, I sit on my bed with my phone and start going through old messages. I archive the text thread with Amelia without reading through it. Just select and archive in 2 taps. Then I open my photos and start a new album called Before, and move about 30 pictures into it, mostly from freshman and sophomore year when everything felt normal. I keep scrolling and deleting, removing Amelia from my main camera roll one photo at a time. My finger hovers over some of them for a few seconds, but I make myself tap delete anyway. The Halloween costumes, the spring break trip, the stupid selfies in her dorm room. Gone. I keep maybe 5 pictures in the Before folder, ones where I look happy and the memory isn't completely ruined. The rest go into my recently deleted album, and I empty it immediately so I can't change my mind later. When I'm done, my photo library looks sparse but cleaner somehow, like I organized a messy closet. My phone actually feels lighter in my hand, even though I know that's not physically possible. I get hungry around 8, so I make myself pasta with olive oil and whatever vegetables are left in my fridge. Just zucchini and cherry tomatoes, nothing fancy or complicated. I drain the pasta and mix everything together in the pot, then carry my bowl to my kitchen table instead of eating on the couch like I usually do. I open my sociology textbook and read while I eat, highlighting sections about social support systems. It's completely ordinary, the kind of moment I used to take for granted before everything happened. But sitting here eating food I made myself, in my own apartment, reading for a class I'm actually keeping up with now, it feels significant somehow. I'm not healed and I'm not triumphant. I still have damaged hair and yellow teeth and medical bills I'll be paying off for months. But I'm steady tonight, and that's enough for right now. So that's today's story, and honestly, what a journey that was. If it made your day even a tiny bit brighter, I'd love for you to join our little corner of the internet by hitting subscribe. Take care of yourselves out there.